Way back in the spring of 1990, 10-year-old me was given a $5 allowance. In search of something to spend my money on, I came upon something fantastic at my local convenience store newsstand. It was then that I started a lifelong obsession with the gold standard of sequential art, the comic book. Now, as an old man, I have decided to open up some old boxes and dig into my comic book collection. I decided it's time for me to review and analyze the illustrations and artists that made me comics crazy. Hey folks, this is Chris Crazy House. Welcome one and welcome all to another episode of Chris Crazy House Presents Comics Crazy. And today we are looking at a big book, and that is X-Force #1. And this is probably the highest selling comic book I've looked at so far on this channel. Okay, I started off with a lot of the books from my own collection, and this one is probably one of the ones that has become a classic over the years. And even back then, it was highly sought after because, once again, this is one of the biggest selling comics of this time. I believe it sold around 5 million, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a lot. You know, this was when the comic book industry was really starting to boom with a lot of artist-driven content. And at this point, you know, Rob Liefeld had been working on New Mutants. It was kind of a low-selling book when he first started, and it became one of the most popular books at Marvel. So we all got to see the transition of New Mutants being kind of like a leftover X book and how it became one of the biggest selling books there and one of the most popular books. And once it got to that popular height, Rob Liefeld lobbied to make a new team book based off a lot of the characters that he helped to create in New Mutants, and that is X-Force. So we're getting full-on Rob Liefeld here, where he has a lot more creative control, not just in design, but in the plotting of these stories and, you know, just the storytelling and everything else. So this is where he really gets to shine with his own book, like a creator-owned book under a large umbrella, a large media machine that is Marvel. So let's start off by looking at the cover here. So this cover is iconic at this point, all right? Because I very much remember seeing this on the playground first. Like, I didn't buy this on the newsstand first. I saw it on the playground, and once I saw it, I knew I had to go get it. A friend of ours brought it to school, and right when we were lining up in the morning, I remember everyone just kind of flipping through the pages together, looking over each other's shoulder, looking at this book. And we just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And it's funny because we went to a private school, a Catholic school, and normally anything that was not religious got automatically confiscated at our school. Like, I remember people getting their Guns N' Roses cassette tapes confiscated. I remember other comic books like the Ghost Rider getting confiscated. So, you know, this X-Force book was one of the ones that showed up there, but somehow the kid that brought it there was, you know, lucky enough that it didn't get confiscated by the nuns or the priest or whatever. We were able to hide this book and everyone got a chance to look at it throughout the day. So let's look at this cover here because it is a wraparound cover. It's not just on the front. It actually goes completely around where you get a shot of the entire team. And this is actually a really good cover as far as drawing your attention and drawing your eye. Now, I've actually tried to draw this cover when it first came out. I tried drawing it several times over and not accomplishing it the way I wanted to, because this is not an easy cover to draw. Rob Liefeld had such a very unique style at the time. It was hard to kind of duplicate, and I knew I wasn't getting it right. But I think probably the only character I drew decent enough was Shatterstar, and that's because probably he was my favorite character at the time. I just loved the way he looked with the swords, the ponytails, and the one big shoulder pad and like the half cape. I thought he was a really cool character, and the way he looked. Likewise, I remember like Cable was hell trying to draw, just trying to get all of his belt buckles and shoulder pads, mechanical arm, and his guns and everything. Not easy to draw at all. And I remember trying to do it during like a lunch period or something like that while we were in school and it not coming out as good as I wanted it to, because Rob Liefeld had a very unique way of drawing things, especially trying to get all the little lines and stuff that he would put into a character's face. But once again, very unique cover, very colorful. It catches your eye very well. And they picked a good color for the background, so that way a lot of these characters stand out. They picked a good like purple / magenta type color for the background, and all of the characters are easily able to stand out in the front. Okay, so let's take a look on the inside. And we are starting off with the X-Force team raiding a base of the Mutant Liberation Front. And this is how so many of these books started off back then. I can't count. Like, if I had a nickel for every comic book that started off like this, where the team was raiding someone's base or attacking some other military force, I would be a rich man by now. If you look over on this side, you see an ad for the Series 2 of the Marvel trading cards. And I remember these very much so. That summer that a lot of these came out, I was trading these cards with a lot of the kids that I went to summer camp with, because I remember being at summer camp that very summer, and we used to trade these cards all the time during the summer camp. But getting back to X-Force #1, the setup for the raid on this base comes in very quickly. They didn't waste too much time in showcasing where these characters are coming from, or what the characters are all about. They assumed that you were a New Mutants fan at this point, because New Mutants was so popular, so you were hyped and ready for X-Force. So they didn't spend too much time introducing you to the character. They just jumped right into the action. And they got the setup here of them getting ready to go into the base. And right here, we get the big splash page of X-Force raiding the Mutant Liberation Front's base. And once again, this type of storytelling was very prevalent during the early 90s. I can tell you honestly that I've done several stories of my own with my own characters where the first issue literally starts off with them raiding somebody's base or attacking somebody. Okay, that's just how things were done back then, and it was a big influence on me. And we see the action influence of Rob Liefeld. We can tell like what was going on at the time just by looking at how he does the action in these books. So at the time, action movies by like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jean-Claude Van Damme were very popular. So if you think about films like the Terminator franchise, if you think about Jim Cameron's sequel to Alien, which was Aliens, if you think about films like Universal Soldier, all that stuff is kind of mixed in with what's going on with Rob Liefeld's artwork. So pop culture was full of a lot of stuff like this, with big guys, big guns, and massive action going on in the realm of pop culture. So we get a great introduction of all the characters here. I think this splash page is actually done pretty well, where the bad guys are kind of off to the side, or maybe off in like the background a little bit, but we get a good shot of all the main characters of this book fighting against them. Okay, and it's a great action shot of these characters. I remember some of the other kids in class, one of the other artists in our elementary school class trying to draw this image here, and this was also not easy because he didn't really get the perspective right. I remember it till this day. The background perspective was way off, but you know, the concentration is all on these characters. And this is actually a pretty cool shot on this page of, you know, the individual characters kind of going into action and doing their thing. And you see the team kind of split off, where you got Cable and Cannonball up in this corner. You got Shatterstar and Domino in this corner. You got Boom Boom in the middle. Warpath kind of just knocking some guys out of the way real easy. And Feral jumping down on some guys. I thought it was very interesting that the Mutant Liberation Front actually has grunts in its operation. Like you would think that they would only have like the powered up mutant characters or like mercenaries and bad guys like that. You wouldn't think they would have foot soldiers, but I guess Rob Liefeld felt that he needed some cannon fodder for his characters to beat up before they got to the main guys. And this story kind of takes on that type of choreography and that sort of vibe where the main characters fight some foot soldiers first, then they fight some of the other bad guys, and they finally get to the main villain of Strife later on. Another great shot. There's lots of money shots in this book, so I feel that Rob Liefeld really hit his stride when it came to doing action sequences at this point. You know, he kind of struggled a little bit at the beginning, and he kind of built his way up when he was creating, you know, a lot of stuff in New Mutants. And this is the peak of that right here, because I think he does a great job of putting this stuff together. Now, once again, don't get too caught up in the anatomy of some of this weaponry here. It's supposed to be futuristic weaponry. That's all you need to know. Don't be trying to see if it's a real gun or not. It's not. All right. But it was fun. It was cool. And that's what we were looking at and enjoying back then. So great shot here of Cable shooting off his gun and his comrades standing behind him, Shatterstar and Feral. And now we got some of the other bad guys showing up. And I would have probably introduced them in a little bit of a bigger panel. That's just me. When I do introductions of new characters into a scene or into a book, I like to make it a little bit bigger. That's just my opinion. I understand he's under deadline, so he had to introduce him as quick as possible. Anyway, another great action pose. This could like be a little mini poster in and of itself. That's the thing about this time period. The artists are really flexing, even just on like a regular page like this, where you get a great action shot of the heroes right here. You also get almost like a pinup shot right here. And this is something that was done in Marvel Comics back then, where they just kind of drew their characters almost in like a monochromatic silhouette, and they're fighting back and forth. Rob Liefeld was known to do this a lot, and he would always have like these weird dots and panels in the background of this base. So it starts off here. I think, what is this character's name? So I can remember. Reaper. Okay, I should have known that because he has the sickle. So Shatterstar, my man, is fighting Reaper. And, you know, they're going back and forth, having some banter as they're fighting. And Shatterstar chops off Reaper's hand. And I remember us going completely berserk in the schoolyard reading this page right here. You know, we were all hyped about this. Little boys love stuff like this. You know, we're sitting here all out there reading and going through the book all together and seeing this crazy action, and to see a character actually get their hand chopped off, and it's one of the good guys doing it. And they even talk about that a little bit within the dialogue of this book, saying that, you know, Shatterstar is really a killer, but he's going to hold back on killing people because he's trying to be more in line with his comrades in X-Force. He doesn't want to kill anybody, but he will if he has to. And he shows that by chopping off this character's hand and maiming him with no problem at all. So great panel work here and great action of Shatterstar chopping off this character's hand and it kind of flying out into the foreground, flying at you. And this is actually not a bad hand. You know, people criticize Rob Liefeld for some of his anatomy. This is actually not that bad considering. Okay, I've seen a lot worse from not only him, but other artists out there. This is actually not bad. And of course, they always had the advertisements for, you know, the gear. You know, he's got an X-Force t-shirt right here. And once again, this is one of the main reasons why a lot of those original Image artists left Marvel, because Marvel was making buku bucks off of their artwork, using their artwork on merchandise and everything like that, and not giving any of the royalties, not even a cut of the royalties, to the artists who made the artwork that they were selling. So, as if getting your hand chopped off was not enough, Reaper then gets kicked in the face by Shatterstar. And as we move from this action sequence, we move to another fight going on in the complex with Cable versus this character here with the 4 arms. And he's trying to, you know, basically give Cable a super bear hug and squeeze him to death. And that's when our good, big, strong character Warpath shows up and hits him with the good old haymaker. All right, kapow. And, you know, this is something that I enjoyed back then, where I finally got to have a better understanding as far as how to design comic book panels, where you have a character being knocked out of the panel. You know, this is where we're starting to see a lot more of that in the 90s, where we have these types of action sequences. But this is cool, seeing Warpath bop this character and knock him all the way out of the panel. Okay, and this is a great shot here. And, you know, we got kind of like a follow-up dialogue here of, you know, Cable talking to Warpath. So, in a way, this is what I mean, when we're getting a first issue, a first action-packed issue, Rob Liefeld is not holding back in this book. And I really appreciate that. I wish we had got more of that with Youngblood #1 with the home team, but we did not. But we get this type of action in X-Force #1. And, you know, Cable says we're looking for the main dude. We're looking for the leader of the Mutant Liberation Front, and that is Strife. And Strife was like the main bad guy for this book for a while, and he became a bigger villain later on with the crossover, the Executioner song. But we get a great shot of him here. We have to flip the book over to get the full view. And we did a lot of this stuff back then as well, where we're flipping books over to get the full splash page. And this is cool. I mean, once again, what else could a 10 or 11-year-old not like in this panel right here? What will we not like? I guess we wouldn't like the little midget girl here. What is her name? Thumbelina or Thumbelina or whatever. But we like Strife. Strife gives you takes all the attention with the way he looks. The guy is covered in metal. He's got spikes. I mean, you can literally hear the dark guitar chords playing in the background when you see this panel. Okay, so, and I guess he's supposed to be looking at a big computer screen. Like, this is supposed to be like a gigantic computer screen, and he's on like a little balcony, kind of looking at that. Very much what you would expect from the main villain and his lair. But, you know, it doesn't make much sense if you try to put too much logic into it. But once again, you can't have logic with stuff like this, because logically, why would anyone wear a costume like that? It'd be too cumbersome to wear, and it would look ridiculous if you walked outside like that. But it looks cool for a comic book. And once again, 10, 11-year-old boys like myself, we were in love with this type of stuff. Getting back to the battle, and now we got Feral versus a character, I think the character's name is Wildside, and it almost kind of looks like Feral. They have like the same hairstyle, which I thought was interesting when I first read this book. But, you know, I just thought maybe it was like a weird style choice or whatever. Like, it was funny. Like, I would always be the person, because I was the biggest comic book fan, I would always be explaining stuff to a lot of my comrades at school. So like my other black friends who read comics used to think that if the characters had the same hairstyle, they must be related. But that wasn't the case. I always had to explain to them, no, the characters are not related. They just have very similar powers and hairstyles. That's all it is. So we got Wild Style fighting off Feral. And Feral was a cool character. I liked the way she looked visually. I thought she looked cooler than Wolf's Bane at the time. I thought she was like a way cooler looking character, and, you know, a lot more ferocious and fearsome. So that's why I appreciated about her. And, you know, she shows just how fearsome she is, because while she's fighting Wildside, she actually breaks his jaw. So I thought she was going to like just like fish hooking him at first. I was like, what in the hell is going on here? But she actually winds up snapping his jaw to the point where he can't even talk anymore, and his jaw is kind of slack. And Cable is worried that, you know, she actually killed him, but she's like saying, you know, she held back, no big deal. And that's when, as the team's getting ready to gang up on him, that's when the character of Zero shows up. And from what I understand, Rob Liefeld created this character just to have some minimalism, just to have a character that literally was just all white and didn't have any insignias or any type of crazy costumes. So he made the character of Zero, and Zero is the teleporter in the group. And Zero would make all like these little portals, and that's how he would help the Mutant Liberation Group escape. So the rest of the team, they try to go get Strife. And, you know, Cable's opening fire at Strife. From what I understand, they're not supposed to be killing anybody, but it looks like he's trying to kill Strife here. And he's opening fire on him, but Zero helps him escape through the portal, and they get away. And Cable is actually so distracted by this, he's so upset that his arch nemesis Strife has gotten away. He's not paying attention to the four-arm dude, but luckily Domino has his back. And she winds up shooting Four-Arm in the head and knocking him unconscious with her laser gun. And we get another cool shot of the two of the female characters on the team of Domino and Boom Boom looking cool here. So we got lots of action so far, and this book is off to a great start. And, you know, why waste time walking to the ship when you can go ahead and teleport? So, you know, Cable uses his own technology to help them teleport back to their spaceship that they're going to fly away in. And that's when we get this shot here of the team in their transport. This is another thing that I very vividly remember stealing for some of my own books back then. So my teams had, you know, their own transport ships or helicopters or whatever, and I would always do a shot with them all kind of sitting in there. And I guess this is kind of trying to do a little bit more of an updated version of what we saw with the X-Men. The X-Men always had the classic Blackbird jet, so X-Force kind of has to have their own version of that. And we got this really weird cylindrical modified alien-looking futuristic ship that Cable has, and that's what they're using for their transport in X-Force. They kind of went for a monochromatic look here. I guess they're just trying to go for something different, but it looks cool. The characters are actually very well drawn in this panel. And this is where we get the transition to Manhattan. Now, I don't think this is actually a good idea. Like, I think if you're going to do a transition, you might as well just wait to the next page to do that. Why do it on this page? You should just kept with the whole conversation within the transport. Maybe made this a little bigger or add some more to this image or something like that. Or maybe even have the ship flying off into the distance. This is something I would recommend to you all as comic book designers. If you're going to transition to a whole new city, wait till you get to the next page. Okay? Don't do this. Don't do your establishing shot on the bottom edge of whatever else is going on in your book. Because, yeah, he could have had the transition right here. You know, if we're going to do an establishing shot and transition to another city, why not have it right here? But I guess he wanted to have some action showing here the character of Gideon and Sunspot. Now, we all know Sunspot used to be a member of the New Mutants, but now he's hooked up with this evil corporate mutant named Gideon. And we get to see them training, fighting some battle bots. This happens a lot in these books, by the way. I think the introduction of Deadpool, like the first part of that book, contains a fight with Gideon training with some battle bots, fighting them off. And that's how we get introduced to Gideon as well. So basically here we just get some exposition of how Sunspot has gone under Gideon's tutelage to become like a corporate overlord himself. So that's what he's going to do now. They're going to go buy out some other company and basically take all of their holdings and take over this other company. And they're kind of just, relishing in how direct and how evil it's going to be and taking over this other company or whatever, right? And, Gideon's just happy. He's just so happy and giddy himself that he is, bringing up Sunspot in his own image as his apprentice. So here we get introduced to, I believe this character's name is Bridge. Yeah, Commander Bridge. And he works for S.H.I.E.L.D. And he's looking into the incident that happened at the Mutant Liberation Front base. All right. So I guess they wanted to introduce some new characters that, that weren't already known within the Marvel universe. So they wanted to use other characters, not just have Nick Fury be in this, because they use Nick Fury in the X-Men #1 book a lot as kind of like the government liaison. So this one, they wanted to use Commander Bridge. And this character looks very much like a Rob Liefeld character. This is pretty typical of his black characters, where they got the high and tight, fade going on there, and the sides completely shaved. He has all like the gear that, Rob Liefeld's characters like to wear, as far as like, the braces around the neck and all the pouches. You get a great little shot of him here and one of his soldiers. For some reason, his soldier's dressed in the Arctic gear, but he's not. He's dressed in red and green, so he sticks out a lot, like a Christmas tree. And basically, they're worried about all the technology that Cable has, and they're thinking they might have to take out X-Force because they might be a threat to the government. So once again, we got another transition here to upstate New York, and we got the hidden base of X-Force. And apparently this used to be a base that was set up by Professor Xavier, and X-Force is using it now. I guess he doesn't have a problem with this rogue team just kind of using his base here. But that's what's going on. We got a conversation with Cable and Cannonball. Cannonball's still, a little bit wary of Cable, even though he's following him and helping him with the raids on the Mutant Liberation Front and joining X-Force. He's still not 100% sure of Cable as, necessarily the leader, because Cable is known for just letting people fall by the wayside. Like, he asked him about a certain character named Tyler that Cable was friends with and was, a comrade of. And I guess when that character just went away, Cable was easy enough to just let him go. So we get another shot here of Domino. I guess this is her downtime gear. She's looking very sexy there. That's another thing about these books. It wasn't just about the male fantasy of being strong and having lots of weapons. You always had to have the sexy females as well. So this is where we find out that Cable actually does have some form of telekinesis. And this is the thing where, I guess Domino knows his secret, and I guess a few others probably know his secret, but the rest of the X-Force team does not know that Cable has mutant powers of telekinesis. They just think he's a cyborg who has lots of guns and futuristic gear. So as we get to this scene here where we actually go to the corporate meeting with Gideon and Sunspot, and they're going to try to take over this corporation, but before they can, that's when Black Tom Cassidy shows up. So Black Tom, we all know, is related to the character of Banshee. He's also best friends with the Juggernaut. So that's where this story is going, because they do bring the Juggernaut in later on with this story. And they've decided to, instead of this corporation getting taken over by Gideon and Sunspot, Black Tom Cassidy has showed up to take all the corporate people hostage. So now it's a hostage situation in this corporate building. And we go back to this hidden base here in Canada, and we get Commander Bridge talking to Nick Fury, and he's basically telling Nick Fury the report of what's been going on with X-Force and how he's basically going to have to take down Cable. And to do so, they're going to have to wake up Weapon X. Okay, so we're going to see that later on in the X-Force books. But that is the end of this particular first issue of X-Force. And once again, we got a great book that started out with a lot of amazing action. We got a lot of setup for the stories that are going to continue later on in this series. So the hostage situation at the corporate building, and also the government wanting to take down X-Force. And we even get some little character profiles here. So that's the extra part of this book. We get some character profiles. We got Deadpool, we have Feral. And this is something I also enjoyed very much so. And I think it's actually a good thing. If you're doing a first issue of your book, maybe you want to have a cool way to introduce or give more information about some of your characters. You do little character profiles like this. And these are supposed to be Cable's personal files. So they're from Cable's perspective on these other characters that we're dealing with in the book and in the series. So you got Shatterstar as well. And we got Bridge, Commander Bridge over here. So that is the end of X-Force #1. We see a great little ad here for the new Deathlock that also came out around this time, written by Dwayne McDuffie. And we get an ad for the all-new X-Men series that's getting ready to come out. So at this time, X-Force was the highest selling book, but this actually wound up beating it. So X-Men #1 comes out by Jim Lee and Chris Claremont, and that winds up becoming the highest selling book in comic book history. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review and analysis of X-Force #1. I truly enjoyed this book. It's one of my favorite books in my collection, and it's just a fun book. You know, this is what comic books are all about, just having fun and enjoying the action and the adventure of these heroes. And this is so very 90s, from the way all the characters look to all the armament, the guns, and the outfits and everything else. It's very 90s, but very much exciting and entertaining when it comes to this type of comic book. So you guys let me know how you feel about it in the comments section, and make sure you like this video so that you're here next time I do another review on Chris Crazy House Presents Comics Crazy. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to my channel so you can catch all my art videos as well as my comic reviews. And make sure you go ahead and share this with someone else who enjoys these types of reviews and loves comic books like I do. Anyway, folks, this is Chris Crazy House signing out. Peace.